Dave Gallagher played 9 years in the majors, including the 95 season with the Philadelphia Phillies. Love talking baseball with Dave as the Phillies 52-26, way out in front right now, 8 games up in the National League East. We're going to talk a little bit big picture, some of the things that we're looking at here with Dave, some Major League Baseball news and notes with Dave Gallagher now on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. What's going on, Dave? Welcome back, buddy.
Thanks, Mike. How are you, bud?
All's good, man. Phil's playing really well. There's a lot of things, after last night, I thought this morning, I said, I got to talk to Dave Gallagher and get his thoughts. I asked the listeners out there throughout the day, are they believing in what they're seeing from Alec Bohm? I know you and I are Bohm guys. We both like his approach and what he brings to the table. He had a little slump there. But what has turned the page for Bohm that maybe he has advanced as a hitter?
Well, this is playing out basically exactly how we spoke, what was it, maybe 2 weeks ago or a week and a half. We talked about this, and he had slid from 360 down to, he might have even fallen under 300.
He was, yeah, under 300.
And I remember you asked me, am I concerned? And it was kind of a two-part answer. I wasn't concerned because his approach will be consistent and it will be productive long-term. As long as he doesn't lose faith in it and he just keeps applying. And the approach we've said on here many times is he picks his spots to turn on a ball and lift. He picks his spots. But he knows how to fight when he's behind the count, when he's got runners in scoring position. If you think of it like logically, would a pitcher ever want to give up a run? Hell no. Like, they're so worried about their earned run average. It's how they get paid. They don't want runs to score. They're going to pitch you tough. They're not going to force seam you down the middle. And some guys swing as if they're looking for that pitch. You're not going to get it. His approach to wait, use the other side of the field will allow him to stay on off speed, allow him to lay off balls that are breaking out of zone. Not all the time, right? You're going to have your ups and downs, but he's consistent. And we also spoke about when Bryce Harper is hot, it's a whole different animal. He does so much damage. When Bohm is hot, he's just consistently driving in runs, but it's not going to be, a 5 RBI, 6 RBI as many times as Bryce does it. Yeah, I think he's going to be there at the end. I know he seemed to get a little tired last year, right in the playoffs, bad time. But he's doing the same thing. He's hitting with runners in scoring position, and I think I heard that Bryce is leading the league in batting average with runners in scoring position, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, the two of them have just been bonkers in the month of June here. I mean, Bryce has been ridiculous this month. Bohm, the two of them, the last 2 weeks have just gone crazy. But that's one of the things about Bohm, and let's kind of get into that a little bit deeper, because a lot of people talk about his lack of power. And, hey, he's a corner infielder. You got to have more power. He's got the 9 home runs. But does he compromise power for what you said, using all fields and hitting for with runners in scoring position? In other words, could he hit more home runs, but he is that disciplined not to?
Absolutely, I think he can. And that's the construction of a lineup. We're not privy to the conversations that the hitting coach has and the manager has with him, but I will guarantee you they want what he gives. Because this year, it looks like Schwarber is actually applying an approach, not so like I'll swing hard every time and every once in a while it's going to hit my bat. He has a great eye, but all of a sudden he's hitting over 250. But he's taking some pitches and going the other way with it. So when you're constructing a lineup, you've got to have somebody that can be more consistent, not easy to pitch to with runners in scoring position. And he's that. So I think they're pleased with it. I think he'll naturally, just with experience and learning pitchers still, like I know he's been around a while now, picking out maybe a few more spots to try to lift the ball or even go to the pull side. Yeah, he may be a 20 to 30 home run guy annually. But what he does to opposing pitchers with runners in scoring position has to give the coaching staff some comfort.
Yeah, the runners in scoring position, last year Bohm was pretty high there as well. And then, of course, in the playoffs, he struggled a little bit. I guess when you take a look at this lineup and the lineup they're putting out there now, you see a lot of platoons there. Do you like the platoons? No Stott. He's been, getting a little bit less against lefty. Marsh, they really don't see lefties at all. Or is that something they're going to have to address, at the deadline?
I think that's exactly what they're trying to figure out. They have the luxury of kind of being in the discovery zone for the playoffs. Let's do it now. They can because they got, not just a good lead over the Braves, but they look better. They just look good. I think you'd agree with me. That pitching staff, I don't think the pitching staff will allow the team to have a long, layoff or slump. I don't think they would allow it unless they lose their health. And right now they've been good, knock on wood. But yeah, I think they can figure things out. Rojas got sent down. I understand it. You and I always talked about it. But they probably weighed out Pache and Rojas. I would guess that Rojas maybe had an option left.
Yeah, he did.
But is there really that big of a difference? Rojas was actually hitting higher than Pache and stealing more bags. But I felt like Pache's at bats, he's in them. He seems to be in them, whereas when I watch Rojas, I tend to think sometimes it looks like he's made up his mind to swing before the pitch is delivered.
Mm-hmm. And
he's hoping that the ball just hits his bat. He just can't survive like that. And the coaching staff's got to weigh that stuff out. I agree with you. I'm concerned about Stott simply because I think they're a better team when he's consistently in the lineup. But this is what happens in competitive performance sports. Look what Sosa's done. He's knocking the door down, saying, like, notice me. Well, they noticed him. So, by the way, I heard you talking about the lineup. Is Sosa playing tonight?
Sosa's at second, no Stott. Now, there's a left-handed pitcher, but, I guess that's the tough part here is being the manager, trying to find ways to get Sosa in the lineup, plus Merrifield, and then realizing, hey, Marsh struggles against lefties, and Stott has been not very good against lefties. But do you want to see a player like Stott, a young player, get into a platoon? I mean, I don't know if it's going to be a straight platoon, but that's why Stott's in the lineup tonight. He's playing second base.
Well, I can tell you because this is the life I led. You push against that as a player. I don't mean complain to management, complain to the GM, complain to the manager, but you fight. You have to. You have to fight against being out of the lineup and being a role player and being a platoon player, especially when you're young.
Yeah.
Because this is how you're making your living. You've got to get it. And the only way you're going to get get paid is to get on the field. So I remember my transition I was on the Mets and I wasn't starting. I'd been pretty much an everyday player, and I was sitting in the dugout and I looked out as the team ran out onto the field. And I remember it was terrible for me because I looked and I said, if I was the manager, that's the lineup I would put out there. And it did not include me. But that helped me to come to that realization, because then I decided I'm going to be the best platoon player I can be. Now, I was in my 30s, like maybe my mid-30s. That's different. You're winding down. It's a little bit easier to accept.
Right, yeah.
So I think they're trying to figure this out, not so much for what's their best lineup now, but what is going to be our best lineup in the playoffs. I really believe they're having those discussions. Same with the pitching staff. Who's going to close? Who's going to get innings? Which starters are going to get pushed to the bullpen? Interesting with Sanchez. It's actually an interesting subject. If you don't mind, if I could bring up.
Yeah.
Sanchez getting paid, getting extended, and then goes out and throws might have been one of his best starts of the year. What that does to you psychologically. And then weigh in Turnbull early in the year was doing really well. We all understand when Taiwan Walker came off that I think they called an IL now, not a DL.
Yes.
But when he came off the injured list, he was going to get put back in. And now all of a sudden Turnbull, when he goes home to his wife or his girlfriend, I don't know if he's married, and they have a conversation at night, and he says, I can't do any more than what I was doing, as well as it's the best I've ever done. And my reward was to be a long man in the bullpen, probably a conversation that went along with it. It's numbers, we have to do this. But the bottom line is now all of a sudden he's having trouble with his feel and his consistency. Well, I'll make the excuse for him. So if he was rewarded with, an additional year or 2 years or whatever, it makes me think, what does that do to the guy? Does he continue on that path? These are the kind of decisions that they have to make at that level. But for anybody that's listening that's a coach at any level, amateur baseball, those are the kinds of things you can do for a player. You believe in a player, you'll probably see the best of what he is. You got to really believe in him.
Mm-hmm.
Not his first offer or his first bad start on the mound, and now he sits for a month. It's not easy to manage. It's not easy to pull the best out of a player. And I think that's what we're seeing right now is the staff feeling their way through those fringe guys and those decisions that they're going to need.
Well, that's it. So the Walker one's interesting, Dave, because obviously last year he was upset because he did not pitch in the playoffs. So the Phillies did not view him, I would imagine, this year as a playoff performer. So I think the writing was on the wall of what was going on here. He's making $18 million a year. He's got to pitch. But what does that do? You guys are all professionals. You're sitting in that locker room, and the guy getting paid less is performing better than the guy who gets paid more. What is the dynamic there, especially on a team that's 25 games over 500? Because when Walker's ready to come back, then what happens?
Yeah, well, that's the whole theory of arbitration. Like arbitration and free agency, you could argue either way that it helped the game or it hurt the game, but everybody compares numbers, which leads me into like, I know the Tigers aren't out of it with the wild card, right? They've got life. There's a lot left in the season. But I'm watching the game. I always watch games different than everybody, I think. And I saw Bryce get, I don't know, it was his fourth hit or whatever yesterday. He had such a good game. And he came back to first base and on defense. He went back out on the field. And the first base coach for Detroit, they were having a conversation. They were laughing. And I thought to myself, Detroit maybe subconsciously, maybe they see it. They just see it. We're not as good as a lot of these teams. So all of a sudden your play becomes selfish. You are only playing for your numbers and your job. This early in the season, that is not good. I just don't see the fight in them. It's almost like they're accepting that we're not good enough and we're going to lose. I don't see that in the body language of the Phillies.
Well, this Phillies team, the story really, Dave, has been, and if you ever been on a team like this where, Castellanos said it the other night, we fight 27 outs. I mean, that sounds cliche, but it seems that this team has so much fun playing together. And I guess that's the, when the offseason you say, well, you're going to run it back with the same team. You're not making any major changes. In fact, they didn't really make any changes. The only guy they brought in was Merrifield, and that really hasn't worked out. But that this group has been together for like 3 years now, I think you're seeing the benefit of letting them stay together.
Absolutely. And I just, I think the fans have really grown to love Harper. And as a ex-player, I did too. Like, I remember I had him in what's called the rookie career program that I'm still doing it. I did it for about 30 years. And he was a rookie. He was in my group.
I find something new about you every time we talk.
Yeah, I get around. But like 30 years I've been doing it, when guys that were rookies. And Bryce was a rookie, and he was in my group. And I just remember him slumping back in a chair like he didn't really want to be there. I don't know if he did or he didn't. But even his first year on the field, there were a couple of circumstances that he got involved with. Now I look at him and he cannot stomach losing. He can't stomach failure. He's learned to handle it better. And if you think back, you will remember Paul O'Neill. Reminds me so much of Paul O'Neill. I played against Paul O'Neill in the minor leagues when he was with the Reds. I watched him kick his helmet back to the dugout after a strike. His own teammates were embarrassed. And then he became, years later, one of the captains for the Yankees. You know, like, the fact that you hate losing ends up being admired by people who really want to win and play to win. That's who the Phillies are right now. And he's the leader of that group. He's not telling anybody he's the leader. It's just, you know, another guy would say that was like that coached for so long. I think he's still coaching in the organization. He's Larry Bowa.
Yeah. Well, listen,
my God.
there is a lot of talk today based on what happened last night. You know, you get a guy like Connor McDavid, MVP, and they lose. And, you know, people are starting to say, hey, who's that other guy? Bryce Harper's name comes up now as that guy who hasn't won a championship yet. So you can see it in him how much it burns him that he is on that list of guys who haven't won a title. And I guess when the guy was the number one pick in the draft. He's been an MVP, and that's the one thing that eludes him. Man, I guess that's got to be tough.
He wants it. He wants it for sure. And I think he's been around enough and had enough success that he can demand it from his teammates. But I think his teammates want it. I think they're following his lead. It's something to watch. Him hitting third and Bone protecting him. And now Bryce actually getting pitched to sometimes. You know, that's not such an easy decision as let's put Bryce on and pitch to Bone anymore.
Right. Well, let me get a quick couple things. Anything that you see from Castellanos that makes you feel like he's coming around? I know he's very, very streaky. I mean, he was white hot in the playoffs against the Braves last year. Then he was ice cold against Arizona. But has he changed anything?
That was a sigh. I don't know if you heard it, but it's probably the same sigh that the Phillies fans have. They need him, but they need the guy that used the other side of the field more often than not. Because remember, it sounds like I'm preaching about that, but it works. It gives you consistency, and you are the author of your own career, right? So if I can just simplify this, when you're thinking the other way, you're going to be strong off speed and away. You're going to be vulnerable in. When you're thinking in, you got to start early enough to get the barrel out there. So you're now good in on fastballs, but you're vulnerable away and everything's soft. Now you get to decide every pitch, which one of those are you using? If you're stuck in the middle between those two, you're done. We've all seen what that looks like. Being stuck in the middle, you can't hit anything. And I want to give you something. I want to give your listeners. Bone, when he's in that approach, and I know because I used a very similar approach, the toughest pitch to hit is a two-seamer that's kind of tailing down and in the zone. Because if it's up and in and you're trying to go the other way, you wait, you drag your barrel, and it's so close to your hands, it's easy to pull your hands inside of that pitch when it's so close to your body. It's right there for your face to see it. You drag your barrel, and you let it hit your sweet spot, and you can flare something to the right side. And sometimes you surprise yourself. If it's a little bit off your body, you can drive it to the right side. But somebody his height, to have to drop his hands down and inside a hard two-seamer is very difficult. Well, you say, why don't people do it? They don't want to miss. They don't want to miss out over the plate when they have a guy 2 strikes.
Huh.
Well, good, right, for a hitter. Good for the hitter that has that approach.
Right.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting though. That's how you get a guy like that out. But pitchers got to have confidence in executing that location.
When you have a team going like this right now, 52-26, as we just kind of chronicled, do you look to add somebody to that, or do you not touch it? Do you not mess with that?
if they can add somebody that's going to help the lineup, that, we just named a number of people who are iffy, right? So they might be able to take full control of that and just say, okay, we got a guy available. We don't have to give up too much. Let's take this shot and really make a run at this. First of all, I think the team will appreciate it. They'll see it. Okay, we're trying. They've got enough talent and enough pitching that they could certainly do nothing and make a run for sure. They're doing it. But I still think they have some questions that have to be answered, like the back end of the bullpen. And they're not bad questions. It's just, does Dominguez have a role? Does Soto have a role in the playoffs? Who is your closer? You definitely have some guys that can do it. So I think they got to, they got to figure that out. I want to ask you a question. I always ask you a question.
I like it.
Starting today, if you had your playoffs starting tomorrow, who are you running out there game 1, game 2, and game 3?
A month ago, we had this discussion, and I said, how do you not go with Suarez at this point? Now, my question was, who would you feel more comfortable in a game 7 spot? Because Suarez is like no heartbeat at all. Now, who would you go with is different from what they're going to do, right? Wheeler's going to pitch game 1, you would think, no matter what, right?
I would think so.
Right. But the question is, do you split the lefties and put Suarez in game 2 and Nola in game 3? I wonder if they would do that. But last year, it's set up that Suarez got the game 7 because he was the third guy. So would you want to try to set it up to get there? If you know what I'm saying? Like if you had a plan, do you plan to have Suarez be in the 7th spot and just keep him as your number 3? I would think that's how they do it.
Well, the fact that you and I are discussing that right now, think about each of those pitchers that you mentioned. They know that's what they're fighting for, and that helps the Phillies. That helps the rotation. They got to fight tooth and nail. Their starts are going to have meaning because if one of them fades towards the end, if Nola fades towards the end, Suarez is going to be the game 2 starter. He has to know that.
Well, what about Sanchez is probably thinking, what about me?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. They showed him a lot of faith, and he already rewarded it. I know it's just one start, but Mike, when somebody believes in you, that's a direct way of showing it. I had enough of like indirect, negative responses. Every time I was sent back to AAA in spring training, that's the organization saying, we don't think you can do it. Mm-hmm. There's nobody saying it to me. But when I'm telling my wife we're going to live in Maine again, I like Maine, by the way. We're going to take the kids and we're going to Maine, and she, sighs. Well, I understand. But that's the team saying we don't think you're good enough. If you think I'm good enough. I had an agent that used to say, this makes me sick to even say it. Every time I would call him, he'd say, how's the best center fielder in the world doing? And I'm thinking, I'm in Waterloo, Iowa. I'm not the best center fielder. What are you doing? Like,
oh, man.
Here, and I had to get another guy.
That's great stuff. Dave Gallagher played 9 years in the majors, one of them with the Phillies, 1995. He played with a ton of great ball players, always great stories and great insight as the Phillies get ready to play the Tigers tonight. By the way, Spencer Turnbull, he'll pitch tomorrow against his former team, so there's another fun story there. We saw a triple play last night. You ever been involved in a triple play?
Boy, that's a great question. I don't remember ever being involved in one or even having it happen on the team I was playing.
Doesn't happen a lot. First time since 2017 for the Phillies. They turned one last night. But, Dave, it's always a pleasure to catch up, and we'll do it again soon, pal.
All right, Mike. Take care.
Dave Gallagher, everybody, at Dave Gallagher 22. If you want to follow him, he has a lot of great baseball tidbits and stuff. He works with a lot of youth organizations as well, and spent 9 years in the majors, along with 1 year in Philadelphia. 1995, he played with the Phillies.